Kia ora. Hi, no mai mai.
Recording in progress.
Welcome to this public webinar hosted by the Future for Local Government. My name is Martin Pingard and I'm the Deputy Director for the Secretariat supporting the panel. Before we kick off, I'll open with a karakia and I'll hand over to Jim Palmer, our Chair, for that karakia.
Kia ora mai tātou, ngā mihi nui, tēnā koutou katoa. Nēnoi tātou, tūtawa mai e ranga, tūtawa mai e raro, tūtawa mai e roto, tūtawa mai e waho. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa. Haumi e hui e tai ki e. Kia ora and welcome. And I'll just pass back to Martin now, who's going to run through how this session is going to unfold. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jim, and thank you. So this morning, the panel is going to do two things, really. First of all, they'll give an overview of their draft report, and then we'll do a Q&A session with yourselves being engaged in asking the panel questions. If you have any technical issues while we're running through it, please use the chat function, and our team will try and do our best to resolve those. The Q&A button is where we would like you to place your questions, and we'll sort of collect those up and we'll deal with them at the end of the presentation. So first slide, please, Caitlin. So the review into the future of local government was established by the Minister of Local Government following calls from the local government sector to explore the purpose and the role of local government in New Zealand, particularly its future given the current changes that are going on. It's an independent review to identify how local democracy and governance needs to change to build and support thriving communities and actively embody the treaty partnership. A draft report was released by the panel on the 28th of October last year, and we've been taking submissions on that, and those submissions run up until the 28th of February. Next slide, please. Our esteemed panel, who are all here today, apart from Anton, who may well be caught up in weather events, is, as you see before him, they'll all be available for Q&A today. And they have been working on the project now for over 2 years. I'll just show you the timeline. It was started in April 2021, and then in September of 2021, there was an interim report that kind of set out the scope and the direction of the panel's intentions in terms of the review. And as I said, last October, we released the draft report and started accepting submissions, which are open through until the 28th of February. The final report will be due in June of this year, around the 19th or 20th, the middle of that month. The report will be handed over to the Minister and to LGNZ. Next slide, please. The panel has been involved in wide and deep engagement with many, many organisations. We've done a lot of online hui because of COVID. We have gone around the country and visited lots of locations and talked to people about the issues. And we've also been taking the usual kind of online submissions, talking to people through the website, etc., etc. So it's been a very engaging engagement for the review, if you like. We also had a specific business reference group, which was made up of 5 business leaders from around the country, whose insights and thoughts and advice have been taken and have been shaping the thinking as we progress through it. So on that point, I'm going to hand over to Jim, the chair of the panel, who will take you through some contents from the draft report.
Kia ora. Thanks, Martin. Myself and panel member Brendan Boyle this morning will run through some of the key aspects of our draft report, and we hope that they act as a bit of a stimulus for the question and answer session that follows. We see our review as a once-in-a-generation opportunity to reimagine local government. Our draft report traverses a broad and complex range of issues, and it asks questions and prompts further debate that will help shape our final report, which, as Martin said, is due in June. In our view, local government has a critical role in responding to the increasingly complex issues that face New Zealand And it's clear that renewal and change is required to ensure local government is ready and able to play that role. We see that major changes are needed for both central and local government, and that local government will need agility and capacity to evolve and respond to the changing environment, drawing on the strengths from communities, from the business sector, from hapu iwi Māori, from central and local government and others to achieve the needs and aspirations of communities. Kia ora. Next slide. A part of our review has been to consider how do we revitalise citizen-led democracy. And in our mind, local government needs to rethink how it operates, and in our view, local government needs to facilitate democracy, not be the holders and deliverers of democracy. The challenges of the 21st century that we know are facing us and the pace of change that is occurring is causing many people to lose trust and confidence in democratic institutions, and as a result, they're starting to disengage. We believe that local government, as the layer of government closest to community, holds the key to rebuilding trust and confidence in civil institutions. The challenge is that the current systems do not support local government to take full advantage of the important role it holds. Part of embracing and extending more citizen-led democracy is, in our mind, something that local government needs to rethink. In particular, we think there are significant opportunities for more inclusive and innovative democracy practices. In many countries, participatory and deliberative democracy processes are regularly used to ensure that the widest and most representative group of voices are heard on key issues. To ensure that participatory and deliberative democracy processes are effective, it will require support from councils to put these into action. While having greater community and citizen participation in decision-making at a local level is important, we still recognise the role that elected members play, and we know for a local government system to be effective and achieve what is needed of it, we need diverse and capable members and governors. We need to attract and support and value elected members who still instill optimism and confidence in their communities and who bring diverse perspectives, cultures and backgrounds. We need highly capable leaders and connectors with lived experience who can bring communities together and who are confident enough to make sound long-term decisions. We need upskilled elected members. This is not just about governance training, but upskilling in all areas, including cultural competence, community development, civic innovation, and connection to international and best practice. Elected members do need to be adequately remunerated and have a decent and supportive work environments. That we as a panel have proposed a number of changes to the system, including changes to the way representation reviews are undertaken and local elections are administered. We've suggested changes in voting mechanisms, the voting age, and the term of elected members we think should be extended to 4 years. We're also posing some thoughts about adding some capability-based appointments and mana whenua appointments to supplement existing elected members, and we're interested in your views on those ideas. Kia ora. In the panel's view, we need to see Te Ao Māori woven into everything we do with explicit recognition of Te Tiriti. We aspire to see Te Ao Māori embedded into the New Zealand identity. The Māori worldview, in our opinion, should be represented in legislation, systems and processes, and expressed in the governance and management and operations of local government. The treaty provisions in the Local Government Act are inadequate. A new legislative framework is required for the relationship with more express and explicit recognition of Te Ao Māori concepts of wellbeing and governance values embedded in the purpose and principles of local government. We think councils should use tikanga in meeting processes and procedures, and we think local government needs to be a safe and welcoming place for Māori to work in. If we are to see the change that we envisage is needed here, it requires a major investment in capacity and capability of local government, along with a national framework for increasing capability and capacity for hapu and iwi to meaningfully participate. I'd now like to pass to Brendan, who's going to talk a little bit about the focus of local government being more focused on wellbeing, roles and functions, the relationship between central and local government, and importantly, funding. Pass now to Brendan.
Thanks, Jim, and good morning, everyone. It's our view that we need a whole new approach to how we value and think about local government's role, and of course, how to deliver it. And when we take account of the complex issues that communities are facing, climate change, of course, that we're right in the middle of seeing some of the adverse effects of, biodiversity loss, the loss of social cohesion that's become an increasingly prominent issue over the last couple of years in New Zealand, the challenging economic conditions that have gone with many of these adverse events. We're of the view that these kind of issues and what communities are facing is not going to be solved through a centralised approach from Wellington alone. It has to be solved in conjunction with local government, with local communities, including the business community. Local government has great potential to better drive economic development. This includes how local government and their economic development agencies, many of you who are represented today, how can collectively they play a greater role in working with and supporting local and regional businesses to maintain and grow an inclusive local economy. And we'd be really interested in your views on that particular facet today. Thanks, Caitlin. We've been asked to have a look at the Council of the Future with a wellbeing focus. And local government's going to have to play a far greater role in tackling some of these big challenges. As we forecast over the next 30 years, we can already anticipate many of these issues repeating themselves, but there will be new unknown challenges which we haven't yet anticipated. How will local government be fit for purpose and well-dressed to tackle those emerging challenges? It's going to require councils to deepen and expand their roles as an anchor institution, as a systems networker and convener, and a placemaker with that strong community localism focus. To do that, wellbeing councils are going to require new skills, new ideas, innovation, and new ways of partnering and working, using the resources they have locally, leveraging the connections to generate more value. Councils can help create and foster the conditions for communities and neighbourhoods to thrive by connecting the strengths and the aspirations of community and business leaders, hapu iwi, and the citizens with the resources they need. Just want to talk a little bit about the relationship, particularly between local and central government. We've heard really strongly over the last year that relationship is very tense, or in many instances broken around the country. And we've also heard from many people that if the only thing this review achieved was to reset and strengthen the relationship between central and local government, then it will have been worth it. And I'm sure you in the business community and advocacy roles that you play will have observed that up close. We believe that new institutional arrangements between central and local government may be needed to support this. Local government can strengthen its role at place and be a foundation partner alongside central government, beginning by working with central government to set local priorities, local outcomes, determine the opportunities, and then collectively co-invest to achieve them. Now, This would be a major change in the way local and central government work together, but the ambition that we have is that the strengths of both will be leveraged and that a new genuine partnership can be forged. But to do that, it is going to require a significant mindset, cultural shift, and potentially different institutional arrangements to enable that to take place. Let's talk a little bit now about funding. Many have commented that we've reached peak rates, and there's been about 17 previous reviews that have recommended and generated a range of suggestions as to how funding of local government could be rethought. However, few, if any, of those have been implemented, and it's our strong view that change is needed. Unfunded mandates need to cease, and by unfunded mandates, we mean where central government makes policy decisions that have flow-through effects for local government without taking consideration of the funding impacts, working on the assumption that local government will just fund that through rates increases. So we believe that needs to cease, and that also funding provision needs to be made for regulatory impacts that have national good benefit, but which are imposed on local government. There needs to be a new approach to funding community outcomes and priorities. We see that if local outcomes and priorities are agreed between central government, local government and others, such as iwi hapu and the business community, there is sustainable central government funding available to support those priorities, and then it's applied in a partnership model through the key players. And if this is enabled, then significant change and improvement could occur. We believe that retaining rates is absolutely important for local autonomy, but that we need to simplify and streamline the long-term planning and the rating processes. And finally, when we consider the ongoing intergenerational challenge that climate change brings, like the Productivity Commission, we believe there needs to be a substantial intergenerational climate change fund created. Thank you. I'm going to pause there and just pass back to Jim, who's going to take us through the final stage of the presentation. Kia ora.
Thanks, Brendan. Just want to touch on a couple of final aspects. One is around the structure and system of local government, and the second one is around stewardship of the overall local government system. In terms of the structure of local government, we've heard loud and clear through our engagement that it's essential to keep the local in local government, while where appropriate, recognising benefits of economies of scale and scope. As a panel at this stage, we don't have a firm view on what the future structure should look like. However, within our draft report, we've outlined design principles and examples that we think should be present in any future system. To achieve what is needed over the next 30 years, we do believe there needs to be change in the system design for local government. Our report has identified 5 design principles that underpin future structures. They are firstly, local, as I mentioned, to keep the local in local government. Secondly, a principle around subsidiarity, in that decision-making should be made at the lowest level possible, and hopefully that includes being close to community. Thirdly, that local government of the future, the entities are resourced, that is, that they're viable and have capacity to respond to the challenges ahead. Fourthly, a principle of partnership, that we need flexible arrangements, whether that's council-controlled organisation or other partnership models that give flexibility and enable community outcomes to be delivered most effectively. And fifthly, we have a principle around economies of scope, where skills and resources are needed to be combined, that's enabled. As part of our draft report, in addition to those 5 principles, we've also identified 3 examples of structures that could give effect to the principles we've outlined. One is a unitary structure, the second is a regional local structure, and the third is what we're calling a local combined network authority model. And more detail on those can be found within the report. We acknowledge that within any structure there are advantages and disadvantages of each, and we're really interested to explore the merits of the principles we've identified and examples and any other ideas that people have, and we're keen to receive that as part of any submissions made. Finally, I just want to talk about system stewardship. We think there needs to be greater consideration to the stewardship function that ensures local government's long-term health and well-being. In terms of local government stewardship, there are a number of people and entities that play a stewardship role, including the Minister, the Department of Internal Affairs, the Local Government Commission, LGNZ, and Taituara, which is a staff organisation that supports executive of local government. They all have a role, and it is in our view that we need to reconsider whether the current way in which we have a stewardship function discharged for the systems needs to be reconsidered. We think a future stewardship system is one that actively promotes and cares for local government, including provides oversight and monitoring of the system's health, including the legislative framework. Secondly, cares for the system's long-term capability and its people. Thirdly, maintains and enhances institutional knowledge and information. And fourthly, and importantly, supports partnerships, co-design and innovation within the sector. Thank you. In our mind, there needs to be some change that occurs within the system. Some of it may need to be in a structural and legislative sense, but much of what we've shared today, apologies, is not new. And we think there are opportunities, particularly for local government, to think about how it undertakes business. There doesn't need to be a new legislative framework to enable more participatory and deliberative democracy practices in place. There doesn't need to be legislation or Wellington to tell local government how to partner more effectively with hapu iwi Māori, with community, with business, for example. There are plenty of opportunities for local government to think and reimagine what it can do now. Having said that, though, there are some things that we do need support from local government, from central government, and as Brendan mentioned, it will be important that central government is also willing to think about how it can change the way it operates to support and enable local government to be its best, and ultimately how central and local government work effectively to ensure the best long-term well-being of communities. So with that overview of our report, I'd now like to pass back to Martin, who will lead the Q&A session. Thanks, Martin.
Good. Thank you, Jim, and thank you, Brendan, for that good run through. Okay, now I've had a look at the participants. We've got lots of people online. If you wish to ask a question to the panel, please use the question and answer function, and that will allow us to see the questions. I will then read those out so the other participants can hear them, and then we'll be able to get the panel to address those questions, and I'll sort of pick a panel member who might be best placed to do that. Then the other panel members will often, when we run these webinars, they'll feel free to sort of add to that chat. So first question is from Matt in Tauranga. Who were the 5 business leaders used to develop the report? Jim, would you like to address that? Because we've been working with the business group prior.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for your question. We established a business reference group at the start of the review, and it was an opportunity for us to meet with them. And we've met 3 or 4 times through the course of our review, where we've just brainstormed ideas, heard thoughts, and received feedback of things that we should be taking into account. So the 5 people who are on our business reference group, Leanne Watson, who's the current Chief Executive of Christchurch and Canterbury Employers Chamber of Commerce, Susan Huria, who's a Director particularly focused in the primary sector and has also connections with a number of Māori business. Dr. Emma Saunders, who's a business consultant. David Kennedy, who has particular expertise in development. He's a director of Panuku in Auckland, and also he's currently leading the build of the Christchurch Arena construction. And the fifth member was Kirk Hope, who is the Chief Executive of Business New Zealand. So hopefully that gives you an idea. And they've each in their own way have made a significant contribution and have provided ideas and thoughts that need to be at the front of our mind as we've developed our draft report. Kia ora.
Thank you, Jim. No other Q&A in the chat. Sorry, in the Q&A box at the moment. We have. Yep. Hold on a second here. Follow-up question from Matt. The funding and finance section was only 17 of the 240 odd pages of the report. Why was it so light? Jim, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Martin, and thanks for your question, Matt. We certainly funding and financing is a critical issue for local government, and everybody acknowledged that. There have been a number of recent reviews, and the Productivity Commission is the most recent entity to undertake a review of local government funding and financing. And as Brendan mentioned, there have been a number before. So a lot of what was traversed in the Productivity Commission's review, we actually agreed with, and we have a link to a paper on our website where we've looked at the recommendations from the productivity and have commented on them. Many of them we've endorsed, and we tried not to extend that further. I think one of the things that we are working our way through, and many of those recommendations we agreed with, one of the things we're working our way through is if there is to be a new model of funding and financing, it's not solely funding and financing, it's highly dependent on views about functions and roles, as well as the relationship between central government and local government, how we work together. So there is an acknowledgement that there needs to be greater contribution to addressing local outcomes, local priorities, and greater central government investment into that. There are challenges certainly within the current rating system, and I know probably a number on this call would say that there are issues with the equity with which different ratepayers receive through the current rating system, and we would acknowledge that there are some challenges in the current rating system, but we tried to focus on what we thought were the key issues rather than getting into a series of detailed recommendations in our funding and financing section. And as you note, at 250 plus pages, our draft report was getting stretched as it was. So we tried to focus in on what we saw are the critical issues. Kia ora.
Thanks for that, Jim. I can't see any more questions. If you're looking, oh, here we go. No, Matt. Matt's keeping the conversation alive. Thank you, Matt. In context of the Tauranga commissioners, you spoke of increasing the capability of elected members. Did the review look into a mix of skill-based appointment members and elected members similar to the former DHBs? And then we have a Waikato question to follow up. So we seem to be getting warmed up. Thank you.
Happy to take that one, Martin. Yes, Matt, we did. And you'll see in the report that we've raised the possibility of sort of a hybrid model where you have elected people and then you have an assessment as to where you might have skill gaps, and then you can actually fill those skill, could be expertise in infrastructure, etc. We also felt that it was important that if non-elected members are appointed to the council, that they have the same voting rights as elected members. And, we will see what sort of feedback we get through the submissions process on that. Yeah, we did. We had a look at the DHB model amongst others. I've had some experience with the DHB model myself, having sat on the Capital and Coast DHB. It's far from perfect, and there's of course a different governance model that's been put in place now. But we felt that at a local government level, the option of having an extended council makeup, which could be elected, potentially mana whenua, and potentially appointed to make up skill gaps, was a really good option. Question here from the chamber, Martin. I'm happy to carry on and talk to that about wellbeing, whether we're suggesting localised stewardship, not in terms of localised management of health, education and police, but we do note that there's probably not significant influence that local government exerts through its processes in engaging particularly with those three, health, education and police. Probably more so with police where there's a closer relationship, but in health and education it's regarded as being more distant. And if you think about the significance of wellbeing, you think of the significance of health and education in communities. It is to us surprising that local government doesn't lean more in and look to influence those elements of what's happening in their communities. Part of that is our logic around central government and local government working together to determine the regional outcomes and priorities where you can take account of those various facets, whether it's law and order or health or education, and then agree on what your focus and investment can be in your communities. So we're not talking management. It is partly influence, but probably not going as far as official stewardship, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Brendan. I think I had a glitch in the internet there, so I think I'm back now. Maybe Gail or Penny would expand on that. Gail, please.
What we've outlined in the chapter on strengthening wellbeing is local government having that systems leadership role, which really taps into the fact that local government has proximity to community and local knowledge that central government doesn't have, and that's often overlooked. And as well as what Brendan said about local government leaning in, we're certainly going to be sending a strong message that local government has a lot to offer and contribute in this space towards community wellbeing, and that needs to be better recognised by central government. And stewardship, I think, is getting closer to what the role is. As Brendan said, definitely not suggesting decentralised service delivery under the umbrella of local government, but the local central government relationship is key to this, harnessing both the strengths of local and central for community wellbeing.
Am I still live or have I frozen? I appear to have frozen.
No, you're still live, Martin.
Am I? I'm good. Oh, great. Look, there was sorry, I'm having terrible internet connection. There's a leading question there, really. I'm just jumping over the Property Council. Haven't forgotten it. We'll come back to it. But there's a sort of question there from Nick, which goes into the same thing around wellness. I get the impression that councils will become less providers of services to properties and more providers of wellbeing and services to people. Putting aside whether this is a good thing, brackets, I'm not convinced, close brackets, how is it continuing to rely on property values-based systems fair for farmers and businesses who pay huge amounts of rates and would most likely get less benefit from what councils do? The benefit principle is critical for funding local government. Penny, maybe you could help us with expanding on that and how it might be addressed through your ideas.
Thank you. And that it is a good question, because it does get to the heart of where some of the politics of this issue sit. And, you know, the debate is do people simply pay their rates as a fee for service, and can you quantify the benefit that everyone gets for their rates? Or is it a little bit more akin to paying tax, where the benefit is spread throughout the wider community for good? What we're looking at is, and I think Gail and Brendan put it very well when they explained that with the changes that are taking place with Three Waters, RMA reform, there is a gradual moving away from council simply being a provider of infrastructure and service to looking at the wider provision of wellbeing. I think what you're asking is, can the benefit that you get be measured against the quantum of rates that you pay? And I think, you know, someone who's been in local government for a long time, we've never been able to draw that as a, you know, an accurate measure of getting value for money. What we're looking at is the wider benefit that all of our communities get if people are employed gainfully, if they are benefiting from local economic development that local councils can develop, if our young people have jobs, if we have provision of good public health, good access to cultural institutions like libraries and community centres. All of this is provided by local government, and the entire community benefits by that. So I guess it's a bit of a circular answer that may generate some more questions. But going back to your direct question, can we measure the benefit that you get for the services that you get? Can they be linked to the quantum of rates that you pay? I don't think that's ever been able to be quantified effectively. Jim may want to disagree with me.
I wouldn't disagree with you, Penny. And Nick, thanks for your question. And it is certainly one of the challenges that we face of what is the best way of, if we are to have a local rating component, which we believe, as we've said, to retain autonomy, that is important. Then what is the best ways of doing that? And we know that particularly capital value and land value, which are the primary bases for charging rates, they're far from perfect in reflecting the wealth necessarily of those of the community, nor are they perfect in determining benefits. As Penny said, and I agree with her, that it is really difficult to clearly identify beneficiaries from particular services that are provided to the whole community, as opposed to targeted services like sewer, water, refuse collection, where there is a direct connection between the service and what people are charged, or generally there is, or there should be anyway. So it is always going to be difficult. And then it comes to the issue of fairness and equity, which there are the toolbox that is available to local government is very wide between uniform charges and a rate in the dollar on property value. And my experience has been that greater reflection on how to charge for particular activities, whether it's fairest on a property value basis or more a uniform charge, is something that, you know, I would always encourage local government to be looking at more robustly about what is fair and equitable to all users of services, but there's no ever clear delineation.
Thank you, Jim. We have a question from the Waikato Chamber of Commerce. You mentioned climate change funding. Have you considered funding changes around population growth, which is generally driven by central government? Who would like to lead on that? I think we've spoken about climate change funding as a challenge in the report.
Actually, I might just make a quick comment to start with. The whole issue of population growth and the impact that this has, you know, both on climate change and the cost of provision of infrastructure, is a really gnarly question that I don't think we've necessarily fully tackled in our report, as it's slightly bigger than our brief. The wider issue, though, is to look at equitable funding for regions of high growth, and I think Jim touched on that when he talked about the funding aspects of our report, looking at possibly an increase in the straight up funding that goes to local government straight from the tax take. I think is something that we would like to consider, and linking that through to the growth in regions is key. New Zealand, Aotearoa as such, doesn't have a population strategy, and it is very difficult to look at how you can rearrange population growth from cities to regions. A lot of that's happening naturally, and the work and the challenging work of local government is to try and keep pace with that, to second guess it, and to model it so that infrastructure and investment happens at an adequate level. But I think most of this circles back to the challenges that we have and how local government is funded adequately and sensibly, and what the relation to the wider tax take is. At the moment, local government, the public spend, I think, is 12% local, 88% central. So, that does need to be addressed.
I think funding population growth and catering for growth is certainly a large part of the business of those councils in particular, which experience significant growth. It's always a challenge, and when added with the new infrastructure challenges that local government are facing and higher regulatory requirements for sewer and water, the call on the capital program is challenging. If Three Waters reform moves as is currently signalled, and we have no view on that, but if it does, then they are matters that are going to go to water service entities, which are going to still be challenged. I think one of the big issues will actually be about how do we ensure that planning for growth is coordinated by all of the various entities that are going to make up in the new mix. And that is something which we're all very interested in. The funding of that, the balance between where does that lie between existing communities and users versus the future users, is always something that has caused some tension, particularly around the fairness and equity of development contribution policies. And there is a share that needs to be borne by those who are coming, but there is also a recognition that in many cases there are added benefits to local communities. So it's a little bit back to Nick's question about how do you get fairness between sharing costs between existing community and essentially future communities.
Thank you, Jim. I understand that Brendan provided a written response to the Property Council's question, in which you can see if you look in the Q&A. But maybe, Brendan, I'll just ask you to expand on that, and then to flow into Matt's question about the review more strongly highlight the frustration amongst the conflicting acts and policies. You have to unmute, Brendan.
Yeah. So the original Property Council question, I'm just trying to find which one that was, but why don't I just address Matt's question. Look, we acknowledge that, Matt. If it's not evident enough in the report, then we can take that on board as we consider our final report, but we have certainly heard quite clearly the frustrations. We've focused a lot on the central local government relationship and trying to improve that through the policy development process, right through to funding and agreeing community outcomes, etc. But yeah, we acknowledge that local government certainly feels very much like a poor cousin to some of those policy development processes, and is often consulted, if it is consulted, very late in the piece, and that makes implementation extremely challenging, not only from a cost perspective, but also just in terms of being able to operationalise some of those central government decisions. So we are conscious of that. We've been working with central and local government chief executives to look at how that can be improved. So we would look to reflect that more in our final report. The next question that Amanda raised was around here, did we look at reducing the number of local government entities merging? Amanda, we've steered clear of the amalgamation question up front, because we knew that as soon as we did that, the only thing that people would focus on in the report was structure and amalgamation. But two things, we have suggested in the report that the status quo around the existing institutional arrangements is not going to be viable going forward, and that the system does need to reconsider its structure. We have suggested some options in the report, and we will be considering how that shapes up in the final report, but the draft does provide some options. And we've also heard from local government frustrations that even when they do want to embark on amalgamations, it's a very difficult hurdle to overcome. So we're likely to be making recommendations around making that easier for local government to instigate and implement of its own accord, but also acknowledging that we will need to be making recommendations around that future structure to advance it. Yes, it's not just about cost of duplication. There is some of that, and there are some opportunities now where we've seen councils working together around some shared systems. But certainly going forward, when you look at the viability, most of our number crunching tells us that you need a population base of about 75 to 100,000 to be viable from a financial perspective. So, you can start to do the numbers and think that in that medium to long term, there's clearly a need for greater convergence.
Thank you, Brendan.
Quick comment to, sorry. Just to add a quick comment to Brendan's, just to reiterate, though, coming as a speaking from someone from Tamaki Makaurau from Auckland, the whole issue of amalgamation should not be confused with cost saving and efficiencies. That certainly hasn't proved to be the case in Auckland. So, as Brendan says, if we look at how to strengthen the whole local government system, this is about how to make it work better, how to make it more collaborative, how to make it a better partner with government, and how to allow government to partner in a more effective way with local government, how to strengthen the abilities for local communities to deliver what's best for those local communities. And that may mean that local governments choose to work more collaboratively together, and they may choose to amalgamate. But I'm really clear that the amalgamation agenda is not there as a proxy for more effective and more cost saving and rates reduction.
Thank you, Penny. Comment really from Nick saying, thanks Penny and Jim, appreciate the response to my question. I think if councils are to do more people-based activities and less property-based activity, we will need a different funding system, which realistically needs central government, brackets, which has the appropriate tax base, close brackets, to open its wallet, perhaps call it a wellbeing assistance rate. Thank you, Nick. Gail, would you like to comment on that?
I'd just say, be interested in a submission from you, Nick, around that idea. And we've certainly heard that, and we've been thinking about how, particularly in terms of equity across the country, where not all local governments are the same, does there need to be national support, particularly for areas where there are significant wellbeing challenges that need national support, but possibly in addition to that, support more directly to local government as well from the national tax take? And we would be interested in your ideas and thoughts about what that could and should look like.
We've been looking at what do communities need in the 21st century and what are the big issues for the next 30 years. And some of those aren't getting water to your property or the rubbish collected weekly. The issues like climate change and economic inequity and how to grow great places for people to live and work and recreate and do business. So some of the emphasis for wellbeing isn't about social services or things that have been traditionally central government responsibility. These are things that actually are no one sector's responsibility. They're partly central government, partly business, partly community, hapu and iwi, and local government. What we're focused on is what's the unique contribution and role that local government can play in that. And we think that local government already plays a big role in communities often in rural communities being a big employer, being the public purpose organisation in a town or city that can play a big role in bringing people together or facilitating cohesion of effort towards wellbeing outcomes, has the relationships, the local knowledge, the proximity to community to be much more active in things involving people and the environment. So we need to keep that in perspective, and we're very much aware at the moment in Auckland with the storms that climate change and natural disasters aren't going to be once in 100 years. They're going to be a rolling impact, and local government, to be fit for the future, can't just be about infrastructure services. It has to be how to help whole communities adapt and to respond to the things that are going to be coming at us, and that means a change of role and a change of mindset about the value of local government and what it can do, partnering with others to address the challenges of the rest of the century.
Thank you, Gail. I'm going to take the opportunity to move to an extension of Jim's call for submissions. We are still open for submissions on the draft report. We would welcome all of your ideas and input. It's been great having this opportunity to talk to you today and over the last couple of years, but we really are moving to the point now where we have to prepare and write the final report. So we would like submissions through on the website by the 28th of February, which is about a week away. We obviously then we'll have quite a period where we'll be dealing with those submissions, considering those submissions, and going into the preparation of the final report for the middle of the year. So please, we're really looking forward to your input and to hearing from you about what you think about the future for local government. Now, having done that little sales pitch, I'll pass back to Jim to close the meeting and close with the karakia, and just from me to say thank you for your attendance and your participation today. It's been great.
Kia ora, and thanks, Martin. And just to build on what Martin said, we would love to hear from you. And on our submissions website, there is an easy to follow submission format. But if you feel time constrained, and I could well imagine that being the case, then just what are the key issues, key ideas that you want to share with us, the key thoughts or recommendations you think we should be adopting in our final report. We would love to hear from you in whichever way is easiest for you. So again, encourage you to submit. Today, thank you for your participation. Thank you for your questions and really thoughtful contributions. And some of those have prompted thoughts as we go. So we're continuing as a panel to be open to good ideas and thoughts that will improve the lot of communities and the well-being thereof. So with that, I will close with karakia. Unuhia te pau whiri marama. Tomo kia te ao whatu tangata, te tai ki ranga, te tai ki raro, te tai ahu ao, homie hui e tai ki e. Kia ora. Mā te wā.